everyone, welcome to the session. Today we are going to talk about micro-teaching. The objectives of today's lesson are to understand what micro-teaching is, to understand the cycle of phases of micro-teaching, and to understand the characteristics of micro-teaching. Before we move into understanding micro-teaching and its significance, let us first look at teaching in general. Let us look at the concept of teaching in detail before we move into understanding in details what micro-teaching is. The art of teaching is a complex process. Teaching does not simply involve transfer of knowledge from the teacher to the student in a classroom setting. Teaching requires good verbal skills and various techniques of teaching along with the vast knowledge of the subject being taught. Teaching helps on facilitating and influencing the process of learning. Let us see how a few prominent scholars try to define teaching. Ryan in 1965 defined teaching as a behavior or activities of persons as they go about doing whatever is required of teachers, particularly those activities which are concerned with the guidance or direction of learning of others. B.F. Skinner in 1968 said that teaching is the arrangement of contingencies of reinforcement under which students learn. They learn without teaching in their natural environment. But teachers arrange special contingencies which expedite learning and hastening the appearance of behavior which would otherwise be acquired slowly, or making scene of appearance of behavior which might otherwise never occur. N.L. Gage in 1963 explained that teaching is an act of interpersonal influence aimed at changing the ways in which other person can or will behave. From all these definitions, we can conclude that teaching is not a simple process which can be defined and universally accepted, and there are no specifically designed techniques or methods of effective teaching. Quality of any educational program depends mostly on teachers, their effectiveness in teaching a subject, and how well the learners have understood from teaching. In such a scenario, a classroom cannot be a place for teachers to practice their teaching skill. Teachers need to acquire teaching skill and practice their teaching skill in teacher education program prior to their actual teaching in classroom. There are various teacher education programs conducted across the globe in order to train and enhance their effectiveness in teaching. The basic requirement of any teacher training program is to enable the teachers to acquire the skills of teaching and develop their competencies through proper training. Systematic approaches need to be followed in order to generate good teachers. There are various techniques and various means by which a teacher can be trained appropriately. One such method used to train teachers to enhance their skill and competences is micro-teaching. Micro-teaching is an innovative way for teachers to enhance their teaching skill. This technique helps teachers in acquiring effective methods of teaching. Before we move into further understanding of micro-teaching in detail, let us look at its origin and history of this technique. Micro-teaching is a teacher education technique developed by the School of Education at Stanford University in 1963. It was first applied both as training and as a diagnostic tool for new teachers. Alan Dwight was the first who introduced the term micro-teaching. The training program at Stanford University initially used micro-teaching to improve trainee teachers' verbal and non-verbal aspects in their teaching, along with the general performance in the classroom. Later on, various adaptations of this training technique has been carried out. The first model of micro-teaching that was developed by Alan Dwight had 3 steps. They are teach, review and reflect, reteach, and during the training session, actual students were used to make the training more authentic. Micro-teaching was initially developed to train science teachers, since there was a dearth of research in this field from pedagogic perspective. Later on, this training technique was introduced to teach language teachers as well. In India, the spread of micro-teaching started in the year 1974. It has undergone various changes since then. Presently, it is being used with great emphasis in all the teacher training programs to develop teaching skills and to improve teaching competencies among trainee teachers. Micro-teaching is also used as a feedback tool for the teachers to reflect on their own teaching techniques. Micro-teaching has undergone various changes and has been adapted for various purposes. Numerous versions of this technique were developed to enhance teaching skill of trainee teachers. A number of experiments have been conducted since then, and various forms of micro-teaching kept evolving throughout the ages. Now that we have seen how the concept of micro-teaching started and evolved into a major training approach, let us look at the definition of the term micro-teaching. Micro-teaching is a unique model of practice teaching. It is a feasible instrument that helps in bringing about desirable changes in the teaching behavior of new teachers. The teachers trained using this technique are expected to have a greater range of technical teaching skill to choose from in order to overcome day-to-day classroom problems. There are various ways in which micro-teaching has been defined. Let us look at a few significant definitions of micro-teaching. According to G.A. Brown, 1978, micro-teaching may be described as a scaled-down teaching situation in which a teacher teaches a brief lesson to a small group of pupils or fellow trainee teachers. The lesson may last from 3 to 4 minutes to 20 minutes. In most cases, about 10 minutes is preferred. The small group may consist of 3 to 4 pupils or peers, or up to 15 pupils or peers. According to B.K. Basi and M.S. Lalita, 1976, micro-teaching is a training technique which requires student teachers to teach a single concept using specified teaching skills to a small number of pupils in a short duration of time. L.C. Singh, 1977, said that micro-teaching is a scaled-down teaching in which a teacher teaches a small unit to a group of 5 pupils for a small period, say from 5 to 20 minutes. Such a situation offers a helpful setting for an experienced or inexperienced teacher to acquire new teaching skills and to refine old ones. Micro-teaching is a system of controlled practice that makes it possible to concentrate on specified teaching behavior and to practice teaching under controlled condition. As we can see that there are common features of micro-teaching in all these definitions. The following given are the 4 common features of micro-teaching. To teach a single concept of content, to teach using specified teaching skill, to teach for a short time, and to teach for a small number of students. Basically, in micro-teaching, the trainee teacher is engaged in a scaled-down teaching situation. Let us see a teaching situation that can be reduced in a micro-teaching technique. In micro-teaching technique, the class size would be reduced to 5 to 10 students and the teaching time would be reduced to 15 to 20 minutes. The trainee teacher uses only one teaching technique at a time to reach out in the class. In most cases, micro-teaching lessons taught by the trainee teachers would be videotaped and recorded. Lessons are recorded so that the trainee teachers, supervisors or peers can observe and give appropriate feedback. Once feedback is given by the supervisors or peers, the trainee teacher would incorporate the given suggestions and reteach the same lesson to a new group of learners. Micro-teaching is a teaching concept that can be used both by in-service and pre-service teachers in order to make professional development. This technique helps in providing teachers with practice setting where the normal complexities of real classroom are reduced to a large extent. In this technique, the teachers also get feedback on their teaching. Now that we have defined micro-teaching, let us look at the way this technique is used in training the teachers. There are three phases of micro-teaching that are followed to train trainee teachers. At the start of the trainee teachers are oriented towards micro-teaching. This is done by giving teachers necessary theoretical background about micro-teaching. The concept of micro-teaching, its significance, requirements for adopting the technique and procedures of micro-teaching are discussed. In this orientation phase, the trainee teachers undergo training in three different phases. The phases are knowledge acquisition phase, skill acquisition phase and transfer phase of micro-teaching. Now let us see what these phases of micro-teaching constitute of. Knowledge acquisition phase. This is the first phase of micro-teaching. In this phase, a trainee teacher gets theoretical perspective on the pedagogical skills and its components. Experts in the field impart knowledge as well as demonstrate the skills. The sub-skills of teaching are taught and the trainee teachers would develop an understanding of when to use which skill and under what condition. Along with the strong theoretical background, the trainee teachers get to observe the experts while teaching them. This helps in observing and learning as well. Skill acquisition phase. This is the second phase of micro-teaching. During this phase, the trainee teachers, based on their theoretical knowledge and observation, plan micro-teaching lessons. Trainee teachers practice the teaching skill through a cyclical model. This phase is an important phase in micro-teaching. Let us see in detail what the cyclical model comprises of. There are 6 steps that are involved in micro-teaching cycle. They are plan, teach, feedback, replan, reteach and refeedback. Now let us see each of these stages in detail. First stage is plan. At this stage, an appropriate topic is selected. The selection of the topic is done keeping in mind the nature of teaching skill being practiced. The selected topic is then analyzed and different activities would be designed to practice teaching. These activities would be designed in a logical manner so as to teach the content as well as to practice the teaching skill under consideration. Next is teach. Whatever has been planned by the trainee teachers is implemented in classroom setting. The trainee teacher is expected to modify their plan depending on the needs of the learners in the classroom. Teachers should be able to handle appropriately any situation they may face in the classroom. Next is feedback. This refers to the responses that are given to the trainee teachers by their peers or supervisors. The suggestions given by them would include the strengths as well as the weaknesses of the trainee teacher. The feedback would help the trainee teacher to enhance their teaching skill. Next is replan. The trainee teacher replans the lessons depending on the feedback given to him or her. The positive inputs would be incorporated and negative aspects would be skillfully eliminated. The trainee teachers can sometimes include the given suggestions in a new topic. Next is reteach. The trainee teacher teaches again according to the new plan of the new topic selected. Then the trainee teacher can teach to the earlier group of learners. If the topic is not changed, then new group of learners are taught. This is done to eliminate boredom. The next stage is re-feedback. Based on the second round of teaching, feedback is given to the teachers in the same manner. The feedback stage is an important stage in the entire teaching cycle. Feedback helps in bringing out the desirable change in the trainee teachers. Trainee teachers continue to teach in this way until they master the teaching skill. As mentioned earlier, the feedback stage plays an important role for teachers to master the specified pedagogic technique or skills. Transfer phase of micro-teaching. This is the last phase of micro-teaching. After attaining mastery level and command over each of the pedagogic techniques, a trainee teacher incorporates all that they have learned to teach in an actual classroom. This is the phase where the skills learnt are actualized in real setting. Till now, we have seen how micro-teaching sessions are carried out. But what is taught as part of this training session is what we try and understand in the next session. As part of the training session, a number of teaching skills are imparted to the trainee teachers. There are various skills of teaching that are taught to the trainee teachers. B.K. Pasi identified a few of the teaching skills which are commonly used to train teachers in micro-teaching sessions. The following given a few of the pedagogic skills that are taught and practiced by trainee teachers. Writing teaching objectives. Introducing a lesson. This skill deals with the various ways by means of which a lesson can be introduced to the learners. The trainee teachers practice various methods of starting a lesson. Fluency in questioning. Questioning is a part of teaching. It helps in making learners alert of what is being taught, and it also helps in arousing the interest of the students. It also helps learners to get clarity in the content that is being taught and helps learners to be involved in teaching. Trainee teachers are taught a variety of techniques like prompting, seeking further information, refocusing, redirecting, etc. to help in questioning learners while teaching. Skills of explaining. This is an essential skill of teaching. Explaining helps one to understand what was previously unknown. It helps on bridging the gap between the person's knowledge. Along with this explanation, it also helps in assimilating and accommodating new information and new ideas. There are various things that a trainee teacher needs to keep in mind while explaining. The given explanation should be clear, it should be continuous, it should be relevant and interesting to the learners, and it should cover the major points. Illustrating with examples. Examples are central to any teaching situation. Examples are used to reinforce the ideas that have been taught by the teachers. The example used while teaching should be relevant, interesting, and simple. There are two ways of using examples. First is deductive approach. In deductive approach, Generalized statements are made and it is applied to a number of examples. And the other is inductive approach, where examples are given first and generalized statements are formed using the given examples. Stimulus variation. This includes the use of 5 senses while teaching in a classroom. Some of the things the trainee teachers are trained in are avoidance of teaching form on spot, the use of gestures, and the development of verbal and non-verbal methods of focusing children's attention, the development of teaching methods other than the teacher monologue by encouraging pupil participation, the systematic use of pauses, and the controlled use of different sensory channels by switching primary modes of communication going, for example, from the oral to the visual. Securing and sustaining the attention of the pupil is imperative to make variations in the stimulus. This is because attention is necessary prerequisite for learning. The components of the skill involve movements, gestures, change in speech pattern, change in interaction style, focusing, pausing, and oral visual switching, etc. Learners respond when questions are asked by the teachers in the classroom. These responses need to be encouraged by the teachers. There are various ways in which a teacher can reinforce learners. Participation of learners will be increased if there are positive reinforcements. The components of the skill involves positive verbal reinforcement, like the use of the words good, excellent, etc. Positive non-verbal reinforcement, like nodding, smiling, and listening intently. Negative verbal reinforcement. This type of reinforcement discourages learners to participate in learning. Use of harsh words or sarcastic remarks should be minimal while teaching. Negative nonverbal reinforcement. This type involves frowning, staring, or looking angrily. This type of reinforcement might intimidate learners and it would create a sense of fear among the learners, thus inhibiting their learning process. Next is using Blackboard. Blackboard is the most simple, suitable, convenient, and widely used teaching aid. A Blackboard should be properly used to effectively teach and make learners learn easily. The components of the skill include legibility in writing, appropriateness of written work, proper presentation, and writing in straight line. Next is classroom management. This includes the ability of the teachers to maintain and control learners in the classroom. The components of the skill include making norm for classroom behavior, checking inappropriate behavior immediately, attending to learner needs, and calling learners by their names, etc. Skills of closure. This is concerned with bringing the lessons to an end. There are various ways by which a lesson can be ended. They are by questioning learners on the major points of the lesson, by discussing the most important points in the lesson, by reiterating, reviewing, or revising the lesson, by giving learners assignments, etc. These are the various skills and their respective components that are taught in micro-teaching sessions. Teacher trainees learn, practice, and acquire each of these skills of teaching to become better teachers. Assumptions of micro-teaching. The following given are the assumptions based on which micro-teaching is practiced to train teachers. First, component teaching skills. It can be practiced for mastery under simplified teaching situation. Next, training with systematic feedback is helpful in skill mastery. Once component teaching skills are mastered one by one, they can be integrated in original teaching. And lastly, training can be transferred to actual teaching. Advantages of micro-teaching. Micro-teaching helps beginner teachers to improve their teaching competencies. Micro-teaching skills helps in developing various teaching skills in trainee teachers. It gives better opportunities for them due to small-scale teaching. Micro-teaching involves the use of activities and it also uses a lot of practice sessions. This effectively increases the confidence level of the trainee teachers. This experience of teaching enables them in better classroom management as well. Unlike other training programs or seminars and workshops, micro-teaching is cost-effective. Teachers can practice it within their classrooms. One of the objectives of this teaching technique is to guide teachers to attain positive attitude towards criticism. As a result, negative feedback also motivates them to work for better results. Micro-teaching helps in systematic lesson planning. Feedback is the best way to improve, and micro-teaching enables the teachers to get immediate feedback from the experts in the field. This helps in promptly rectifying mistakes. This training helps in mastering the sub-skills of teaching like explaining, questioning, probing, etc. Further, it helps in forming and improving a separate teaching style for the trainee teachers. So this session was about micro-teaching. There were 3 objectives for this session. The session started by defining teaching skills in general. In the second part of the session, the concept of micro-teaching was introduced and all the components of this training technique were described and discussed in depth. This session concluded with the elements of teaching skills and advantages of using micro-teaching sessions.